Welcome to everybody. This is our fourth webinar in the RESPACC project. RESPACC comes from research, palliative competencies for palliative care clinicians, and the aim is really to bring research into the work of the clinicians in the field of palliative care. And we had the privilege to have several journal clubs. This one is directed to several webinars, and this one is directed towards being more, giving us more solutions how to make journal clubs an experience that is enjoyed by the team and that is really expected by the team as an opportunity. We have the privilege to have with us Dr. Charles van Gunten. He is famous for as a pioneer in palliative care in America, and also as the person who has contributed successfully to developing palliative care and also palliative care in the oncology through the EPEC-O project. He is he's well known as he is the one leading the Journal of Palliative Medicine, and also because of his contribution in the I think it's subspecialty that you have or fellowship that you have in palliative care, and I think you are the one who is chairing the testing committee, but the committee which is responsible for the exams for palliative care. Thank you very much. Welcome, and I hope we will have a very pleasant session.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I am delighted to be here, and I'm going to share my screen, if I can do this right. All right, so I am joined by Lisa Pelzik-Brown, who is the managing editor of Journal of Palliative Medicine and Palliative Medicine Reports. But the main reason I asked her to join me in this, as she has been my co-conspirator in this project that we engaged locally to try and invigorate our journal club. So Lisa, what I would say about Lisa before she speaks is she has been with the journal for 25 years, which is as long as the journal has been published. But she also has been supporting education in palliative care for even longer. So she's a real expert. And because she is not a clinician herself, she gets to see things and observe behaviors of the people we're trying to teach in ways that I would never be able to see. So with that, Lisa, say something about your background.
Good day to everyone. As Charles said, I've been with the journal for 25 years since its inception. I've also worked in on a number of other grant projects in palliative education, first with David Weissman at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and then Charles. As he said, I've gotten to know a lot of people in the field. I recognize some names in the chat, some people that have recently reviewed for me, so thank you. And my background is in communications and healthcare administration.
Terrific. So with that, I can get my, so the reason this topic is important is that the future of palliative care is in the people we teach. Now, that because we want the field to improve, we want the research to improve, and the people we teach are the ones that are going to be moving the field forward in one way or another. So I think that's why this is a topic that's so important for this project that you all are conducting. But I suspect for you, as it was for me, is I was asked for our training program based in Ohio, where 3 training programs for physicians and others in palliative care have been ongoing. Would you please organize the journal club? And for many of you, that probably strikes fear in your heart. The learning objectives for journal clubs are probably the same the world over. You want people to be able to critically read and evaluate the research literature. That means, what does it mean to have a hypothesis, and how do you generate that? What are the research methodologies? Particularly watching for who is participating in the research and looking for bias, and of course, the statistical methods. One of the issues, I think, that makes journal clubs so difficult is there are really 2 populations of people. There are the academics, there are the researchers. I suspect many of you on this call fall in that category. That's a relatively small group of people who are doing the research, trying to publish their research, and they are focused heavily on how do you do good research. There is a much larger group, 10 times or more larger, of clinicians, people who take care of patients. They get up in the morning thinking about the patients they're going to care for. And although they want the results of the research, they are not doing research. They won't ever develop a trial. And in some ways, at least the way I think of it, that the challenge in journal club, particularly it's often an academic that's asked to do journal club, is how do you pull the clinicians in to get them interested? And for those of you who are educators, you know the key step before you ever get any information across is how do you engage the learners and make it interesting? How do you get them to want to learn? So I think everyone deals with this challenge, that everyone hates journal club. And I did this so we could say it out loud, because the first thing you need to do in any problem is bring light to it. So what do people say about journal club? That it's boring, that it's painful, you can't get anybody to speak up, it seems empty to the clinicians. Many, certainly in the US, have bad memories of journal clubs in the past where they've been belittled or shamed. And I have heard more than one person say, I would rather have my fingernails pulled out than go to journal club. Lisa, what could you add to what you've heard people say about journal club, particularly when I'm not around?
Well, now we've made it fun, so I don't hear negative things, but
in your past.
In the past, there was just that dread of, and putting off of waiting to read the articles until the night before, and worrying that they're not going to be highlighting what, whoever's directing journal club wants to hear. And I think it's just a dread of one of those things that's on your calendar that you keep putting off until the last minute.
So the hypothesis that popped into our minds was this: if the participants have to evaluate a manuscript yet to be published, and if their participation matters, they will get more out of journal club. Now, it has been a pattern for as long as I've been a physician to notice that faculty who have been asked to peer review a manuscript have the students, the fellows, the trainees, the junior faculty participate in that review. So this isn't something new that a peer reviewer asks others to help him or her in the review, but it is taking it a little step further. So what I thought I would do is walk through the method, and then we will go back through it and tease apart the how. My intent in this is to spark an interest in you because you know the learners you're trying to engage. Is there something in what we tried that you might be able to do? And the organizers here have two handouts for you. In addition to these slides, which you are welcome to, they will also have a detailed how-to that we put together for those that need to do this after us. So I don't think you need to take detailed notes here. You can have those in the handouts. So the method we used, and this was with what Lisa said, since people don't prepare a long time ahead. So 1 week before the journal club, Lisa sent out 2 articles, a classic article from the field and a manuscript currently under review. This session, then we did this monthly for an hour. The first 10-15 minutes of the session we spent on the classic article, and the classic article were chosen from in our opinion, form the foundations of the field. Now, you don't have to know this yourself. Eduardo Bruera and his colleagues published a book with Oxford a couple years ago, the top 50 articles that everyone in palliative care should know. So that work has been done. Of the ones I choose, I look for a varied methodology, so examples of the key methodologies in our field. But my role in presenting this paper is to provide the color commentary. Why is it a classic article? What was happening at the time before the article? Why was that research needed? What was the line of thinking? And particularly, what were the controversies? Or if I happen to know the people involved, it makes, rather than a dry article, it's real people trying to solve a problem of the time. Then we spend the majority on what I'll call the live manuscript. My job is to facilitate the discussion. My job is not to tell them why, how this is or how to evaluate it, but my job is to listen, to encourage debate, and to pull out those different points of view. Now, for those of you who are thinking, oh, I couldn't do that, you facilitate family meetings every day. You know what it's like to try and bring people together. You facilitate team meetings with different disciplines, different points of view. You know how to do this. It's just in the setting of evaluating a manuscript. Then I ask them to vote. We take about 5 minutes on this. I go to a whiteboard with a marker. And these are the categories that those of you review know you are asked to commit when you review a manuscript. Should the manuscript be accepted for publication as is? Does it need minor revision, which is mostly editorial? Does it need major revision, which means it needs substantial rework and review again? Or should it be rejected? Either outright, it should never see the light of day, or refer to Palliative Medicine Reports, our sister journal, an open access journal, and maybe they might find it something that they want. I then let them discuss, because once the group has committed to voting, and I just make hash marks on the board under each of those 4 categories, and there is never unanimity. Well, then you've already got your little sample size, and then I ask them to discuss, and they debate among themselves. Why did someone think it should be accepted and someone else thought it should be rejected? What were the merits? The things that they found in the manuscript acceptable, and then I ask them to vote again, the same categories. And interestingly, it always changes. You can see the group, their points of view that were brought up that they hadn't really thought of. Someone else is persuasive. And it's fun to watch the group process of the group in the moment and then across sessions across the year. And then we finish with 5 minutes of what is the one thing you're going to take away from the session. And we go around the room for the things they're going to take away about. And invariably, it comes up that they've, in addition to understanding, well, where this is coming from and how does it fit, they take away something about research and its challenges. And often it's also about the other people in the room and appreciating the team. So with that, if that's, and that really is very much how we started. All right, we're going to try and start this and we'll see how it goes. What about that preparation period? So we start in the very beginning in the orientation to Journal Club to change expectations, because as I said, people come to Journal Club expecting to hate it. They're expecting that it's going to be like the other journal clubs they've been to, and they'd rather be somewhere else. So we start by asking what their experiences are, getting them to talk, just like you start a family meeting. Tell me what you understand about the illness. Tell me what you understand about Journal Club and what its point of view is. But then when we say how we're going to do this, this is not the kind of journal club where you'll learn what the literature says. But most know nothing about peer review, so that they are pledged to confidentiality and being constructive in their discussion. There's research and people's manuscript. These are their children, their manuscripts. This is their life's work. It needs to be treated carefully and preciously. And their advice to me is, just as all peer reviewers, is advisory. I get to make the last decision. So they're not making the decision, but they're giving advice to me as the editor. And I also tell them this allows them to put reviewer for Journal of Palliative Medicine on their curriculum vitae. Lisa, what else pops to mind as part of this orientation, and what do you see among the participants?
I think the first few years that we were using this format, people were a little bit more hesitant, but now that the word is out, they come so much more engaged and looking forward to, I think, just looking forward to the discussion and knowing that that it's a safe space and they can share their views. One thing I've noticed this year, because you're not leading the fellows anymore, is that they are much more willing to speak out at the beginning. You know, it's more, there's less of a fear of, you know, Charles is exalted and I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so I think that that is one thing that I noticed this year.
So there are two things that you mentioned that are important there. This word on the street. And by definition, this is stuff I never hear. What do you notice about how trainees talk when they're away from the professor, but in earshot of you?
I think I notice that they're more likely to be vulnerable and you know, share that they don't feel, you know, they're insecure about their competency of evaluating papers and giving their opinion. And that's one thing that I see that I think that they don't maybe show to you as much.
And I think this this partnership between Lisa and me in doing this, I think represents something much larger. And the second point that because I am exalted, I am the professor, that, and of course, I don't see that. I don't see myself that way. I think I'm kind, generous. We're just folks. And that's absurd. I have an influence in the room, just like those of you who are members of clinical teams notice patients say things, they say different things depending on whether the doctor is in the room or not. They say different things away from them, but you get to hear, and it's critically important. So this partnership that Lisa and I developed, really important, that she's not the doctor, that she's not the professor. She gets much closer to what is actually happening than I ever see, because people want to please me. Is that fair, Lisa?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a fact that you influence your people, and you may be part of the issue. You stifle people's decision because they want to please you. And although I would like to think that doesn't happen for me, I'm a fool if I think that. Lisa, and one of the things, Lisa and I have had this lovely relationship where Lisa will tell me, Charles, you are a fool for thinking that you don't have an effect on them. Of course they're frightened of you. And I need that feedback. So the classic manuscript. Let me use an example. We have often started with this study from the Journal of the American Medical Association, published in 1995, the support study. The study to understand prognoses and preferences for outcomes and risks of treatments. This was the most expensive, elaborate, and negative study that's ever been published in palliative care that I'm aware of. So in the late 80s, when this was funded, this was $50 million US. In the 80s, when 50 million was a lot of money, it was massive. The best hospitals in the country in a pre-post study design, more than 5,000 patients. And it was to be the crowning achievement that if you just did advanced care planning, if a nurse talked to the patients and families and then talked to the doctors, all problems in ICUs would go away, patients would get the care they wanted, and futile care would go away. No need for a specialty. All we needed to do was communicate. And it was negative. They beat that data every which way and couldn't come up with anything other than it didn't work. It was a waste of money. It was the springboard. It's the reason that the field got started, certainly in the US. That kind of, so the methodology is superb. Everything about it was superb, but it didn't work. So there are numerous articles like that that you're aware of that were pivotal points in the development of our field that everybody should know something about. One of the reasons that I bring up support, like so many negative studies, people keep trying over and over again to redo them. They think, oh, well, they just didn't do it right. Much of the advanced care planning research that we still get, in many ways, partly they're ignorant of support and partly because nobody wants to believe it, that it didn't work. But those are the kind of stories, those are the kind of papers that I try and find for the classic papers. Now, Lisa, what do you have to observe about the classics that we choose or what we do in the room to try and make them live for people?
Yeah, I mean, we try to match them, so that they at least have some sort of correlation to the unreviewed paper, and so that we are having some sort of theme. And also, I think, because these are fellows, they haven't read how the field that they're entering has started, and they don't really know. Not that they don't know, but there's a lot of negative undertones that a lot of us are aware of that have been going on for a long time that they're not aware of. That before palliative care was a subspecialty, it was not looked on very fondly. And I think that, and seeing some of the papers that are negative results helps them realize that that we've come a long way, but also at the same time, we're still fighting some of the same battles, if that makes any sense.
Well, Americans are justifiably criticized for not knowing their history. Young people are often criticized for being ignorant of history and thinking that the world was born for them and they will solve the problems. Whatever the basis for this, helping them, and that Lisa's point about being able to say it right, this was then, and then, all right, now we're coming up to a manuscript for today. This is, if that was the leading edge then, and this is an example of the methodology that got us here, where are we now? How do we, so there is that sense of directionality to the research, that everything that's being evaluated now, that's being studied now, builds on the shoulders of others' work. And you need to know what other people did so you don't waste your time, or so you're investigating in the areas that are going to be fruitful. So in discussing using support as an example, what about the sites? Was it representative? Well, they were 5 of the best academic hospitals in the country. Some would say the world. Well, is that representative of all hospitals, of the hospital that we're in now? What is the culture of the ICU? Who decides what's going on? When you look at the study design, did it really get at how decisions are made in ICUs that you work in? It was a nurse that facilitated the conversation. Was that a good or a bad idea? What kind of culture do you see? How are decisions made? But the goal is to find what's the leading edge? Where is this going? What new things are needed? Being able to see the horizon of the research. So looking back, but looking forward. So I said, this book that Eduardo Bruera and his colleagues published, 50 studies every palliative care doctor should know. I would say 50 studies that everybody working in palliative care should know. Oxford University Press, 2018. So you don't have to find this list, it's already there. And one of the handouts is an Excel spreadsheet of those studies taken from the book. So this is the how-to. We know the article. I always start by asking for someone to summarize the article. I don't summarize it. I ask for someone to summarize it. They're supposed to have read it. And then I wait. Lisa, what's that waiting like?
It's generally awkward. And then there's always the one person who will always be the first to speak up. And then we need to sometimes silence them and give somebody else an opportunity.
So for those of you who are practicing clinical palliative care, do you recognize this from when you start a family meeting? Tell me what you understand. And nobody wants to speak. And that urge, in the training, you need to be quiet and not fill the vacuum. Silence is so coercive. But I sit and I make I commit to myself, I will not speak, even if we sit there for 20 minutes. And Lisa's point, someone always speaks. It may seem like hours to me, but I just sit calmly and wait. It also creates because the ones that are shuffling or trying to bring it up on their phone, or you can tell the people that didn't read it. Sitting with that uncomfortableness rather than filling the space, I think, is one of the reasons fraternal clubs don't work, because Lisa pointed out they feel awkward already about their abilities. They don't want to say the wrong thing and have me think they're stupid. All the same things you see in family meetings, why people don't always tell everything in the beginning until some, Lisa used the word safety is generated. So that is the parallel. You already know how to do this, but it is still a challenge after all these years for me to ask somebody to summarize and sit quietly and sit with the discomfort. Right, so if that's the classic manuscript, then what happens when we go to the live manuscript? So again, I want to reiterate, this is long known in peer review. You are welcome, any of you who are reviewers, to do this with manuscripts that you have from any of the journals for which you review. It's always been a learning opportunity. And of course, I make clear that they're doing two things. They're developing advice to the author. So, and those comments need to be constructive. There are major criticisms, minor criticisms like language choice or word choice, or and then separately is the confidential advice to the editor. What do they think should happen to this manuscript? So we identify someone in the group who will be the scribe, who will jot down everybody's things and will collate it into that written advice. But this point about, here again, just like for the classic paper, I asked someone to summarize the paper and there is silence. Lisa, say more about what you observe at this part, the helping them to develop confidence to talk in a group. What do you see me do? What do you see happens in the absence of me? You're such a good observer of this.
I think, well, when we start at the beginning of the year, everyone is unsure and nobody wants to speak. And as we go along through the months, there's always somebody who's more fired up about the manuscript, negatively or positively, that can't wait to start. And so I think it's just a matter of letting, once they realize it's a safe space and their opinions respected, and that will give them the confidence to speak. So I think time is probably the best problem solver for that initial quietness. I mean, sometimes you do need to prompt and ask a leading question just to get the ball rolling, especially at the beginning of the year.
So I think Lisa's made all the important points, that just like any new skill, it takes time to develop it. It has been reproducible from year to year. Their teamwork develops, but the key point here is don't do the work for them. Don't give, I try very hard not to give my opinion, but to be the facilitator role, not the professor role, in terms of telling them what they should have noticed, telling them what, and then I try not to react to what people say, but to encourage others, and encouraging disagreement and debate among the group. And I will call out the people that just, once the conversation is started, I will say, Joey, what are you thinking? Mary, what are you thinking? Because everyone is thinking, but there are usually some people who are quiet. There's always the first one, but Lisa's point, you don't want them to dominate. The other ones are thinking, and simply Mary, tell me what's going through your mind, in the same way you do at family meetings when you say to the third daughter, tell me what you're thinking. And the ball does it in every time. It always gets going is that fair, Lisa, that we have never had a time when it didn't begin? Is that fair?
I agree. Yes.
So this key, and then asking them to vote. I offer no opinion myself about what I think the decision should be. I simply facilitate and record. And what is fun is you get to see the data from the room and the patterns. I see it, they see it. We're creating data in the moment for them to consider. And everyone in the room gets a vote. There's no distinction for discipline. So although this is principally physicians, we have pharmacist learners, we've had nurse learners. Have we had others, Lisa?
Oh, pharmacists. No, I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. But I asked Lisa for a vote. And I always have Lisa be at the end because of the people in the room. She's the one with the most knowledge of all the manuscripts who have ever come for review. She has a vast exposure. And she often provides this is how this fits related to everything else. And I love having that come from Lisa, because then they begin to see Lisa as, oh, you really know this, even though you're not a clinician, you have knowledge, and it stimulates that team, that horizontal team feeling in the room. Do you feel it that way, Lisa?
Yes. Sometimes I'm even surprised myself that I have knowledge. You know, usually if a paper is highly clinical and I read it and I was like, I don't like this paper, but I don't know enough, and I just go to journal club with an open mind, and then everybody else feels the same way. That makes me feel like, oh, I guess I maybe know more than I thought I did.
And I think that's an indication of what happens in the room in team as they're doing something that they're unaccustomed to doing as a team. So encouraging differing points of view, that phrase that all of you have, tell me more. People will, well, particularly if they're tenuous, they may a little bit, well, I don't quite agree, tell me more. Those facilitating comments you know how to do to pull out what they're really thinking about it. And then commenting on the values you see, or the importance given to various aspects of the research. Pulling that out. And in this is where a difference of opinion in the room is your friend, because the more debate you can get, the person that thinks methodology is important, the person that thinks that the clinical question is important. And I try to ask leading questions about what's the importance to you as clinicians? Does this matter? Would you like the solution for this? Does this matter to the field? That idea that research is sequential. You're building on the shoulders of others. This may not answer it, but is it preliminary to other work? Was it daring? Was it risky? Was it explorative? And then I also help, these are all generally research manuscripts, but some, they're not ready to be research manuscripts, the 3,000 word, fully formed. They should be in the 1,500 word brief reports, or perhaps a letter to the editor that gets the nugget of the value that moves things forward, but it's not ready for being a full report, because so much in our literature, if they've only got 5 patients, or 10 patients, or 15, it's unlikely to be anything definitive. But having people in the room debate on that. Lisa, what else do you observe about the discussion part?
I think what I observe the most, and every group is different, every group has its own dynamic. I think what I observe the most is that I think they just really enjoy the opportunity to debate a topic and feel, just the fact that their opinion matters and that they have an opinion, I think is just so important.
So on revoting, expect the changes. You'll see the room move. They will have moved each other. And I try and praise the behaviors I see, the integrity, the willingness to hold out, to have an opinion, the willingness to change in the face of new information or further discussion. Now, we asked our learners to evaluate this, to what helps. And of course, key was what behaviors do they see me demonstrate? And the key ones that came out is that I'm non-judgmental. I don't react. Just in a family meeting, you don't react to the various points of view. The tell me more encouragement and the sense of valuing the input are key. Lisa, are there any other behaviors that seem very important to the learners?
I think I was going to say respect, but I mean, that's the same as valuing input. I think being there, that you see them as having something that they have something to offer, even though they're in training, they haven't, a lot of them haven't been in clinical practice for very long, that they feel that, that they have valid opinions.
So the hypothesis then that got us going down this path, if the participants have to evaluate a manuscript yet to be published, and if their participation matters, they will get more out of journal. So the outcome, this has gone from the worst element of their training to the best. They talk about it. Turns out it's been a recruitment tool. People, the fellows themselves tell others that are looking to come, this is a great part of the training program. So we conclude that it has worked. And so that's the spirit in which we offer it to you. Again, I'll emphasize that our organizers here have a list of the papers. This is the list that I've used. You're welcome to it, as well as a how-to guide that is a compilation of everything that we do, plus what the learners have said they appreciate, the behaviors they want to see in us that help make it one of the best aspects of their training. Lisa, you're aware that this is continued now with other people leading it because I retired from that role, and you've done this with another program. What have you observed?
Well, we have used the framework with the Duke Fellows, which is a much smaller group, more intimate setting. But, because we just started it, it's at that awkward, we don't really know how much of an opinion we should give at this point. And so, we're back to that loosening up phase with the Ohio Health, OSU Nationwide Children Fellow group. I think they see the current leader as more of a peer, and so they're much more open with their comments, and we started off the year very strong, and now and even some people who haven't participated much at the beginning are really opening up, providing more comments. I think just taking more of an ownership in the journal club itself.
So a key point here is that, having the professor, the big man, because I can't help it that I have that reputation, in many ways is a barrier to good journal club. That this message that the more horizontal it is, the more it feels like there's a collaborative, we're all learning together, is what makes it stronger. Is that fair, Lisa, as a conclusion?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. So in concluding then, the future of palliative care is in the people we teach. And at least this is one way that we have found to make the Journal Club a vital, vibrant, appreciated part of that training. So with that, I'll stop. And Lisa and I are happy to take any questions.
We haven't announced. I think it's important because you are muted by the host, so you can ask questions in the chat, or if you want to ask a live question, you can raise your hand from the reaction on the bottom. You have reactions and raise your hand, and then one will unmute and you can also ask live the question. I see there is already question. There are a question. Who has in the journal club meeting, who has the coordinating role? The one who presents or somebody else, the director, for example? It's a question from Andreas.
Lisa, will you comment about the coordination of this?
Coordination is done jointly, basically. So when we realize that we need a paper, I look through the current papers in the Manuscript Central system that have been submitted, and we usually look for an original research paper, not a review article or a brief report. And then I'll usually give a list to Charles or the leaders and have them select if there's enough papers to select from, and then try to match it theme-wise with one of the classic papers.
And that's generally something that I have done of selecting. And then there's an overall coordinator for the training program, what day, what time, who's doing what, and it's collaborated with that person. What else? What other questions do you have?
There is another question. According to your model, should we form a working group at the beginning of the year who should do this journal club during each month of the year or 6 months of the year? So
Lisa.
I think there are questions because journal clubs are maybe not so in our countries, or at least in Romania, are not a regular part of either education or so. How, I mean, I think this question is related. So if you have your team and you don't rotate people who are coming into training, so do you do it with groups, with volunteers from your clinicians, or do you name them, or how should we tackle that?
We're happy to give an opinion, but you know your place best. I would think the place to start is, what are you hoping to achieve with a journal club? And being clear what your objective is important. The thing I've tried to point out is if there is a researcher that's trying to make those other people understand research, that is not a good place to start. If there's a shared willingness, what are the things that people would find useful for them to spend time doing? I think that's a lovely way to do. And I think it's lovely to have if you need a working group to decide, what do we want to do with this that would make it useful? Seems like a lovely way to start.
With the current model, we have a core working group, and I think that it helps bring in other perspectives, because we have 1 out of 9 fellows. We have 1 pediatrics fellow, but some people with a med peds background, and so I think it helps to have other perspectives rather than, perhaps one person determining all the articles.
There is another question. the peer review process of a manuscript would be a real, it's more a comment than the question, would be a real help to have a better guarantee to be published. So can it serve as motivation?
This process makes manuscripts better. So if I put on a different hat of leading large programs, academic programs, the more you can get your authors to share their manuscripts locally and be willing to get the feedback, it strengthens it rather than submitting to the journal and having us be the ones to give you the feedback. Doing that internally, doing that in preparation for submitting a manuscript is going to make it a stronger manuscript. That's certain. Just like places that make sure that the grant applications are vetted internally first, and that feedback internally makes it much stronger when it gets to the reviewing agency. I can't help but think that would happen here too.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions in the chat. I was wondering, because we are now having our national journal, and we hope for it to become an Eastern European journal. So if we could use some of those articles, as you were saying, for with our students for review and try to engage this model. My question is also to you, Charles. So you have this, let's say, 50 classical articles. Do you come back to these 50 classical articles? I mean, you go through them and then you come back because your trainees are changing, or do you add new classical articles?
I've stayed with the same list. This is a year-long training curriculum, so that's generally 11 months of the year, so 11 out of the 50. So I haven't found the need to go beyond the list. There's nothing magical about it. I think any article that you find worthy, it's that it's mostly the function of it. How does it help people know where we've been, to create that direction of where are we going? Where should we go? If you were doing the research, where would you take it? How would you develop this? That's how I try and use the classic, because there is no solution. It's Lisa said it so well. Well, we know where we've been, and it's better now, but it's by no means finished. There's so much more that we need. Getting that enthusiasm for people like, oh, this is where we need to go, and this is what we need to do. There's a lovely spirit to that.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think we got back ideas how we can really improve the processes in our own places, or start this process. I think the good thing is that if it's something new, they don't have expectations of being painful and like pulling your fingernails. So I think we start with a positive and with an opportunity. But I think it's good to start it, and thank you for your advice, to start it to be something useful for our team. So, and engaging, as you said. And also thank you for providing the list with the 50 articles. I think the list, Juana will email it to people who have been in the webinar. And also I see that Juana wrote here that the presentation will be available, the recording will be available on the project site. And also before we close, and saying also thank you to Lisa for bringing and completing what, adding to what Charles was presenting and bringing a different perspective. And I think that's very important. I would like also to say that there are 2 more courses that will be possible to be accessed on the online format, not face-to-face, because face-to-face will be only for the partners. And one I will put information in the chat, and if you are interested, you can put your names. I think she presented where you can in the Google form. I think one Google form you have to put a link, really the link, because it's written just Google form. So I think you have to put a link as words. So thank you to all for taking your time. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, Charles and Lisa, and wishing you all, okay, you have now the link. Wishing you all a wonderful day or evening, up to which part of the world you are, and hope to be together during other trainings in RESPACC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.